$200,000 in exchange for a single evening. Those were his exact words. And for a brief moment, I was completely stunned. I remained motionless, gripping the towel that encircled my body as if it were my only anchor to reality. My stepfather, Adam, positioned himself several feet from where I stood in the corridor, his gaze meeting mine with a revolting combination of arrogance and urgency, as though he had practiced this scenario countless times. Initially, shock rendered me speechless, but when words finally emerged, they exploded from me, a blend of incredulity, fury, and complete revulsion. What is fundamentally wrong with you? I bellowed, retreating as quickly as possible. My name is Michelle. I'm currently happily married with 2 children and thankfully worlds apart from the person who found herself in that hallway. Back then, I was 25, recently graduated from college, and struggling under the weight of overwhelming student loan debt. I held a position as an assistant professor at a community college, attempting to establish my career while barely earning enough to cover my basic expenses. Thought my father had relocated to another country during my teenage years and essentially vanished from our family. My mother, Julia, had wed Adam when I reached 20, and frankly, he wasn't someone I would have ever chosen to welcome into my life. However, my mother was infatuated with him, or at least appeared to be. At 45, he possessed wealth and supplied her with all her desires. Despite my mother being somewhat older than him, the situation began that particular afternoon when I was spending the weekend at my mother's residence, something I seldom did because being in her presence wasn't comfortable. Julia and I had never shared a strong bond, particularly following my twin sister's death during our childhood. With finances being extremely tight, I reasoned that staying with her for a few days would help me save on grocery costs and perhaps allow us to have a meaningful conversation for once. That day, I had ventured out for a run in the brutally hot weather, returning completely soaked in perspiration. I discovered a message on the kitchen counter, indicating that my mother was visiting a friend while Adam had departed for grocery shopping. Excellent, I thought, believing I had the house to myself temporarily. I proceeded directly to the shower without bothering to gather clothing, assuming no one would return for several hours. Following my shower, I wrapped myself in a towel and made my way toward the bedroom where I had left my garments. It never occurred to me that someone might have returned early. Why would it? But the moment I rounded the corner, there he stood, Adam, positioned at the hallway's end. My heart plummeted. He wasn't meant to be there. And the manner in which he observed me wasn't normal. Initially. I wondered if I had surprised him or vice versa, but then he smiled, not a warm stepfather smile, but something entirely different. Before I could utter a word, he moved closer, far too close. You're stunning. You realize that he said, his voice subdued as if he were testing boundaries. I became paralyzed, uncertain how to react or respond. My mind was screaming at me to flee, but my feet seemed glued to the floor. Then he made the proposition that made my stomach churn. $200,000 for one evening, he stated as if presenting a business transaction. His manner was composed, almost nonchalant, as though this was normal conversation with one's stepdaughter. That's when realization struck. He wasn't joking. He meant every repulsive word. I felt as though all oxygen had been extracted from the room. My thoughts raced, but I couldn't formulate a single coherent response. What did you just say? I managed to gasp, my voice unrecognizable, trembling, barely above a whisper. Adam remained unfazed, continuing to regard me with that disgusting smirk. You understood me? He replied, shrugging as if it meant nothing. Consider it, Michelle. 200,000. You could eliminate your debts, begin anew. Nobody would need to know. That's when rage erupted, rising so rapidly I could feel my hands quivering. Have you lost your mind? I screamed, backing away from him. What type of person do you believe I am? He didn't retreat, didn't even appear ashamed. If anything, he seemed irritated, as if I were being unreasonable. Relax, he said, his voice maintaining that infuriating calm. It's merely a proposal. You don't need to dramatize it, a proposal. He stood there, attempting to purchase me, yet had the nerve to tell me to relax. My entire body trembled, and I couldn't bear to look at him anymore. I spun around and fled directly to my room, slamming and locking the door behind me. Once secured, I pressed my back against the door, attempting to steady my breathing. My heart pounded so intensely it caused pain. I felt imprisoned, not just in the room, but in the entire predicament. What was I supposed to do? I wanted to scream, weep, hurl something, but above all, I wanted to be anywhere except there. The most devastating part was knowing I had no one to contact. My mother would never believe me. She never believed me regarding anything significant, and this she'd probably manipulate to be my fault somehow, as she consistently did. I sat on the floor, embracing my knees, trying to determine my next move. Minutes crawled by, each one extending endlessly as I remained there in silence. Through the thin walls, I could hear the television's low murmur. Adam had made himself comfortable in the living room as if nothing had occurred. His audacity made me nauseous. Then, finally, the sound of the front door opening shattered the tension. I heard my mother's voice, cheerful and casual, as if it were just another ordinary evening. Momentarily, relief flooded through me. She had returned. But almost immediately, a wave of dread followed. What was I supposed to say? Would she even listen? My palms were damp as I unlocked the door and stepped into the hallway. There she was, placing her purse on the counter while Adam reclined on the couch without a care in the world. My stomach turned, but I swallowed hard and found my voice. Mom, I need to speak with you privately. She turned to observe me, her brow creasing slightly. What's the matter? She asked, her tone more impatient than worried. My eyes shifted to Adam, who was watching us as if this were entertainment. I despised how composed he appeared, as though he already anticipated how this would unfold. I gestured toward the kitchen, trying to maintain a steady voice. Could we just talk in private? My mother sighed, but accompanied me to the kitchen. I could feel my hands trembling as I leaned against the counter, searching for the appropriate words. Mom, I began, my voice breaking. Adam said something to me. Something revolting. Her expression shifted, but not in the way I had hoped. Instead of concern, there was annoyance. What are you discussing? She asked sharply. I took a deep breath, feeling as though I was about to leap off a precipice. He offered me money. $200,000 to sleep with him. The words felt like acid leaving my mouth. I expected shock, anger, something. But what I received instead made my heart sink. Her expression hardened, and she released a bitter laugh. Oh, for heaven's sake, Michelle, don't be absurd. I stared at her, astounded. I'm not fabricating this, I said, my voice rising. He said it earlier in the hallway, but she wasn't listening. She was already shaking her head, her lips twisting into a sneer. You're incredible, she said. I should have known you'd create something like this, always seeking attention, always attempting to cause trouble. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother was dismissing me as if I were some troublemaker inventing lies. I felt tears forming, but I refused to let them fall. I'm not lying, I repeated more loudly, my voice shaking. She raised her hand to silence me, her expression cold and distant. Enough, Michelle. Let's hear what Adam has to say about this. She stormed back into the living room, and I followed, my heart racing. Adam looked up from the couch as if we had merely interrupted his peaceful evening. Adam? My mother said sharply, her voice edged with anger. Michelle just told me you said something completely inappropriate to her. She's claiming you offered her money for... She hesitated, glancing at me with an icy glare. For you know what? She made a suggestive expression, seemingly embarrassed to speak the words. Adam leaned back slightly, his expression shifting to one of exaggerated concern, as if he were the one being wronged. Julia, I don't know how to express this, but it's the reverse of what she's claiming, he said, shaking his head as if the mere suggestion was absurd. She emerged from the bathroom wearing only a towel and, well, it EMD, like she was trying to attract my attention. He glanced at me with a look of false sympathy. I didn't want to mention it because I didn't want to upset you, but she's distorting the entire situation now. My jaw dropped. What? I shouted, my voice cracking as I stepped forward. That's not what occurred. And, but Adam maintained his composure, holding up his hands in mock defense. I swear, Julia, I was going to ignore it because I didn't think it was worth creating problems. But I can't just sit here and allow her to make these accusations. He sounded calm, even reasonable, which made my blood boil. I turned to my mother, desperate for her to see through his lies, but the look on her face made my stomach drop. She wasn't looking at him, she was glaring at me. My mother didn't speak initially, but her glare conveyed everything. She believed him. Of course she did. Unbelievable, she muttered, shaking her head. You come into my home, and this is how you behave. How dare you, Michelle? Her words struck me like a slap. I felt my face flush with heat, my body trembling with frustration and anger. You're seriously taking his side, I yelled, my voice cracking. He's lying, Mom. He's lying to your face. But she wasn't listening. She turned to Adam and placed a hand on his shoulder as if he were the victim. I'm so sorry you had to endure this, she said, her tone dripping with sympathy. That was it. I couldn't tolerate another second in that house. I turned and stormed toward the door, my hands shaking as I grabbed my bag. You know what? Forget it, I said, my voice trembling. Believe whatever you want, but I'm finished. I didn't wait for her response. I simply walked away, tears blurring my vision as I collected what I had brought and headed toward the front door. I could barely breathe, the weight of betrayal and anger pressing down on my chest As I reached the front door, I heard her voice behind me, cold and sharp. I didn't expect much from you, Michelle, but I never thought you were. She began, but couldn't finish the word. I spun around, my hand still gripping the door handle. Don't you dare, I said, my voice low but shaking with anger. My eyes burned as I stared at her, feeling every ounce of hurt and betrayal welling up inside me. You want to believe him? Fine. But don't you ever call me that? She stood there, arms crossed, her face hard. For a second, I thought she might actually say it, but she didn't. Instead, she just turned away, dismissing me as if I were nothing. I opened the door, stepped outside, and slammed it behind me as hard as I could. I could feel the tears beginning to fall again. But I refused to let her see them, not her, not Adam, not anyone in that house. I practically ran to my vehicle, threw my bag into the passenger seat, and climbed in, gripping the steering wheel. So tightly, my knuckles went white. I drove without direction for several minutes, the streets blurring through my tears. The anger and humiliation were too overwhelming to contain that. Finally, I pulled over to the roadside, parked the car, and let everything out. My hands gripped the steering wheel as sobs racked my body, the weight of everything crashing down on me. After a while, I wiped my face with my sleeve, attempting to steady my breathing, but the knot in my chest wouldn't disappear. I needed to speak with someone, anyone, but I didn't know who to contact. My mother was out of the question, and there was no way I'd approach anyone who might turn this into gossip. Then I thought of John. He was just a good friend at that time, someone I trusted. I hesitated momentarily, feeling embarrassed about what had happened, but I needed to release it before it consumed me. With trembling hands, I picked up my phone and dialed his number. It rang several times before he answered, his voice calm and familiar. "Michelle, is everything all right?" he asked immediately, sensing something was wrong. That was all it took for the tears to start again. "John," I said, my voice breaking, "I need to talk to someone. Can I just tell you what happened?" I braced myself for his reaction, not knowing if he'd judge me or think I was overreacting, but I didn't care. I just needed to let it out. John and I weren't anything more than friends back then. Good friends, but nothing romantic. We'd met at the community college where I worked. He was one of those people who always seemed easy to talk to, the kind of person who'd crack a joke at the right moment to lighten the mood or offer a listening ear when you needed one. Over the months, we'd grabbed coffee a few times, and I always felt comfortable around him. He never pushed, never judged, just a good, solid friend. That's why, even though I felt humiliated and raw, I dialed his number. He was one of the few people I trusted to listen without twisting things around or making me feel worse. As the phone rang, part of me worried I was burdening him with too much, but the moment he answered, I knew I'd made the right choice. His voice was calm and steady, a stark contrast to the chaos I was feeling. "Hey, Michelle," he said. "What's going on? You sound upset." John suggested we meet at a nearby park. I think he could tell from my voice that I needed to get out to talk, face to face with someone who wouldn't make me feel small. I drove there, still trying to collect myself, though my hands were trembling on the steering wheel. When I arrived, I spotted him sitting on a bench under one of the large oak trees, his usual easygoing expression replaced by one of quiet concern. As I approached, he stood up, and gave me a small smile. "Hey," he said, his voice soft. "You okay?" I shook my head, biting my lip to keep from breaking down again. We sat on the bench, and for a moment I just stared at the ground, trying to find the words. Finally, I took a deep breath and told him everything about Adam, his disgusting offer, and how my mother not only didn't believe me but turned it all around on me. As the words spilled out, I felt a mix of anger and relief, like I was finally letting go of a weight I'd been carrying all night. When I finished, I looked up at John, half expecting him to have the same doubtful expression my mother had given me. Instead, his face was filled with quiet anger, not at me, but at the situation, at Adam. "Michelle," he said firmly, his voice steady, "I believe you. Every word." Hearing those words felt like the ground beneath me had finally steadied, even if just for a moment. I let out a shaky breath, and tears welled up again, not from sadness this time, but from relief. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He shook his head, his jaw tightening. "You shouldn't have to deal with this. What he did. It's disgusting. And your mom, she should have had your back. No question." His words felt like balm on an open wound. For the first time all day, I didn't feel completely alone, and I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. But everything came pouring out before I could stop it. "It's not just this," I said, my voice trembling. "My mom, she's always been cold with me, ever since Lily." I paused, swallowing hard. "Ever since my sister died." I was 7, and we were at the playground. She chased after a ball, ran into the street, and my words trailed off as the memory hit me like a wave. The screech of tires, the screams, it all came rushing back. John didn't say anything, just nodded, letting me get it out. "It was an accident," I continued, my voice cracking. "But it's like my mom never saw it that way. After that day, everything changed. She stopped looking at me the same, stopped hugging me. She just shut me out. And now, tonight, it's like she's blaming me all over again. Like I'm the bad one. Like I did something wrong. I don't know why I even thought she'd believe me." Tears rolled down my cheeks, and I quickly wiped them away, embarrassed by how much I was unraveling. The next few days were a blur of anger, hurt, and sleepless nights. I couldn't shake Adam's smug expression, the way he twisted everything to make me look like the villain, and my mother, the way she defended him without hesitation. Cut deeper than I expected. But the more I thought about to see him for what he was, the idea hit me one night as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. My phone, I could use my phone to record him. It was simple, and I always had it on me. The thought made my pulse quicken. If I could get Adam to repeat what he said, or even hint at it, I'd finally have proof something my mother couldn't brush off or twist against me. I decided the best way to catch Adam off guard was to play along, to make him think I was everything. It made my stomach turn just thinking about it, but I knew this was the only way to get him to admit the truth. That evening, I called him, keeping my voice steady as if I was genuinely conflicted. "Adam, I've been thinking about what happened the other day," I said, forcing a hesitant tone. "Maybe we should meet somewhere quiet to talk. I feel like maybe we misunderstood each other." There was a pause on the other end, and I held my breath, waiting for his response. Finally, he said, "Well, I'm glad you're being reasonable about it, Michelle. Where do you want to meet?" His voice had that same smug undertone that made my skin crawl, but I stayed calm. "There's a park nearby," I suggested. "It's quiet, and we won't be interrupted." He agreed without hesitation, and I hung up immediately. Opening the voice recorder app on my phone, I rehearsed what I'd say, trying to keep the anger in check. This was my chance to expose him, and I wasn't going to mess it up. As soon as I saw Adam walking toward the bench where I was waiting, I discreetly started the recording app on my phone, keeping it hidden in my jacket pocket. My hands were clammy, but I reminded myself to stay calm. I had to make this believable. I stood up as he approached, forcing a small, nervous smile. "Hey, Adam," I said, keeping my voice soft. "Thanks for meeting me. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I wanted to apologize if I misunderstood anything." He smiled, that same irritatingly smug expression he always wore when he thought he was in control. "I appreciate that, Michelle," he said, sitting down on the bench beside me. "I knew you'd come around eventually. Sometimes emotions get the better of us, you know?" I nodded, pretending to agree. Yeah, maybe I overreacted. I was shocked, and I probably didn't handle things the way I should have. I paused, glancing at him. "I just need to understand, what did you mean when you said what you said about the money?" His expression shifted slightly, like he was weighing how much to say. "Look," he began, leaning forward. "I only brought it up because I thought we had a certain understanding. You're a smart, beautiful woman, Michelle. I thought maybe you'd see the opportunity for what it was." I swallowed hard, keeping my voice steady. "But $200,000? That's a lot of money, Adam. Why would you even offer something like that? What were you expecting from me?" He chuckled lightly, shaking his head. "I wasn't expecting anything, really. I was just testing the waters, seeing if maybe you'd consider it. You're struggling, right? I thought it might help us both." I felt my stomach turn, but I kept my face neutral. "Help us both? How?" I pressed, my voice quiet but steady. He smirked, leaning back on the bench. "Let's not play games, Michelle. You know exactly what I meant. I didn't think you'd make such a big deal out of it. It's not like anyone else had to know." I nodded slowly, letting the silence hang for a moment before speaking again. "So you were serious about the 200,000? He shrugged casually. "Of course I was. I don't say things I don't mean, Michelle. I figured you'd appreciate the gesture." Every word he said made my blood boil, but I stayed calm, knowing the recorder was picking up everything. I glanced at him one last time, my voice soft but firm. "Thanks for clearing that up, Adam. I needed to hear it from you." I forced myself to smile faintly, looking down at my hands as if I was embarrassed. "You're not wrong, Adam," I said, hesitantly, my voice low. "I am struggling. Money's been tight, and with my loans, I feel like I'm drowning most days." I glanced at him, catching the faint glimmer of excitement in his eyes as he shifted slightly closer. "You don't have to feel bad about that," he said, his tone softening in a way that almost sounded comforting, but I knew better. "You're a smart girl, Michelle. You've got options, and I'm offering you something that could change your life. It's not just about the money, it's about making things easy for both of us." I nodded slowly, pretending to mull it over. "It's just ... I don't know. I've never thought about anything like this before." I paused, then added, forcing a nervous laugh as if I were embarrassed to admit it. I mean, it's not like you're unattractive or anything. You're actually pretty good looking, Adam. His smile widened, and he sat up straighter, clearly encouraged. Well, thank you, he said, his voice taking on a more confident tone. See? It doesn't have to be awkward. I knew you'd understand eventually. This could be something good for both of us. Michelle, you just have to let yourself see it that way. I glanced at him again, feigning uncertainty. Maybe you're right. I just need some time to think about it, I said, standing up slowly. Can I let you know in a couple of days? I just need to wrap my head around everything. Of course, he said, smiling broadly now. Take all the time you need. I'm glad we could talk this through. I nodded, offering him a weak smile, before turning and walking away, my phone still recording in my pocket. My hands were trembling, but not from nervousness anymore. I had him. Every disgusting word was captured, and I knew exactly what I was going to do next. 2 days later, I called Adam. My stomach churned as I dialed his number, but I reminded myself that this was all part of the plan. He picked up on the second ring, sounding eager, like he'd been waiting for this call. Michelle, he said smoothly, I was hoping to hear from you. Have you had time to think? I hesitated for effect, then replied, Yeah, I've been thinking. I'm ready to talk more about it, but I'd like to meet somewhere private. Somewhere out of the way. I heard the excitement in his voice as he responded, Of course. Tell me where and when. I'd already decided on the location, the Grand Regent, I said, a fancy hotel downtown that Adam and my mom like to brag about. Let's meet in the lobby tonight around 8. We can figure out the details there. He didn't hesitate, agreeing immediately. Perfect, he said. I'll see you tonight. When I hung up, I sat back and took a deep breath. Everything was in place. My phone was fully charged, and I'd already set up the recorder app to start with one tap. Tonight, Adam would think he'd won, but this time, I wasn't walking away empty-handed. At 7:50, I called Adam, keeping my voice calm but a little rushed. Hey, I'm running a bit late, I told him. Traffic's a nightmare. Why don't you go ahead and wait for me in a suite? I'll meet you there as soon as I can. He didn't hesitate. Clearly eager. No problem, Michelle. I'll let the reception staff know about you. After hanging up, I drove straight to my mother's house, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. When she opened the door, her face immediately twisted with suspicion. What do you want? She asked, her tone sharp. Didn't waste time. Mom, you're coming with me, I said firmly. She started to argue, but I cut her off, my voice steady but full of emotion. If you don't come with me right now, I swear you'll never see me again. Not a call, not a visit, nothing. This is your one chance. Her eyes widened, and after a tense moment, she grabbed her purse and followed me to the car. When we arrived at the hotel, my heart was pounding, but I kept my composure. My mother sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her arms crossed, not saying a word. I parked the car and led her through the grand entrance of the hotel. The air smelled of polished wood and fresh flowers, the kind of luxury Adam and my mom loved to flaunt. I walked straight to the reception desk, keeping my voice calm but firm. Hi, someone's waiting for me, but I don't know the room number. They said I should give you my name here. I told the receptionist my name. She nodded, typing quickly on her computer before picking up the phone to confirm. Yes, room 704, 7th floor? I turned to my mom, holding out the key card. Let's go, I said, my voice steady. She didn't respond but followed me into the elevator. The ride up felt like an eternity. When we reached the room, I took a deep breath before sliding the card into the door. The lock clicked, and I pushed it open. Adam was sitting in an armchair, looking far too comfortable. He looked up, expecting me to be alone, but his expression quickly changed when he saw my mother standing behind me. His smile faltered, and he shot up from the chair. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice sharper than usual, his confidence suddenly wavering. I stepped into the room, my mother trailing behind me. Adam's face was a mix of confusion and panic as he glanced between us. "What's going on, Michelle?" he demanded, trying to keep his voice steady, but the cracks were already showing. I pulled out my phone, holding it tightly in my hand. "I thought it was time we cleared up that little misunderstanding, Adam," I said, my voice cold. "You remember, don't you? The conversation we had at the park 2 days ago." His eyes darted to my mom, then back to me. "Michelle, I don't know what you're talking about," he said quickly, his usual smugness replaced by a nervous edge. "I think you're making a big mistake here." I smiled faintly, my hand trembling slightly as I tapped the play button on my phone. His voice filled the room, crystal clear. Every disgusting word he'd said at the park played back. His offers, his excuses, and worst of all, his casual admission that he meant every word. My mother's face paled as the recording continued. She froze, her eyes wide as she stared at Adam. When the recording finished, I turned to my mother, my voice steady but full of emotion. "That's the man you defended, the one you chose to believe over me. Now, tell me, Mom, am I still the liar here?" Adam started stammering, his face red with panic. "Julia, this is all being twisted. She set me up," he blurted, his voice rising in desperation. "You can't believe this. She's just trying to turn you against me." But my mother didn't. "Look at him." Her gaze stayed fixed on me, her mouth slightly open, as if she couldn't find the words. "Finally," she whispered, "is this real, Michelle?" Her voice was barely audible, but there was no mistaking the crack in it. My mother and I didn't talk much on the drive home, but something shifted. For the first time in my life, I felt like she truly saw me. A week later, she filed for divorce, and Adam was out of our lives for good. She never saw him again, and neither did I. In the weeks that followed, my mother and I started talking more, and slowly, our relationship began to heal. She apologized, truly apologized for not believing me and for the way she had treated me over the years. It wasn't an instant fix, but it was a start. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just the shadow of the daughter she'd lost. I was her daughter too, and she wanted me in her life. Looking back, that night changed everything. It forced me to stand up for myself in a way I never had before. It was hard, painful, and messy, but it also gave me my voice and my life back. My mother treats me with respect now, and though we'll never be perfect, we found a way to move forward. As for me, going through all of that brought me closer to John. He was there for me through every step, checking in, supporting me, and never once doubting me. What started as a friendship grew into something more over time. By the time I turned 30, we were married, And now, with Bobby and Emma, I have the family I always dreamed of. A family built on trust and love. Something I once thought I'd never have.